Howdy, all. Let's talk about building the model garage. First of all, you're going to be building this thing that looks like this, and it's the only exception for you is that you're only going to have 3 trusses instead of all, I think, 9 of them. But other than that, the structure will basically be the same. Your distances that are in this are when you see a schematic or a plan are going to be 3/4 inch equals 1 foot. So you're going to be using your scale. Step 1 is to take inventory. Let's take a look at what we got. So along with the floor, this is the floor. You should have a piece of 1/8 inch hardboard, or maybe it's 1/4 inch board, depending on what we're doing. That's going to serve as the floor. This is a 20 by 16 garage, which means that scaled down to 3/4, this is a 9 inch wide by 12 inch long board. Excuse me. So let's take a look at what we've got. We got the floor. You'll be dealing with that later. You should have a bundle of studs that look like that. Now the stud, just like if you were to go to the lumber yard or go to Home Depot and buy studs, is a very specific length. And that's why they're all the same, because that's going to be the length that when you add the bottom plate and the top plate and the double top plate, this becomes about 1 inch longer than 8 feet. I don't remember the exact specification of that, but it allows for a piece of drywall on the ceiling, and then your sheet of drywall or 2 if they're horizontal down the side, and a little bit of extra space. So they're designed to be that way. And there's 8 foot, 9 foot, 10 foot studs. So for a 8, 9, or 10 foot wall, we have 8 foot studs. Now it just so happens that if you take a look at your templates, you have a set of templates that piece is already exactly the right length in your template. Okay, so that's going to work out really, really well. All right, so you have these. You also have some thicker boards that are like this. This is your garage header. Now it's already cut to length, and then you have a door and window header that you're going to have to cut. And in fact, they're just broken on the ends because that was the easiest way to get you your materials, but you're going to have to cut them. If you take a look at your big header, it is already cut to the exact size. The camera kind of flares out a little bit, but if you look at it, it's exactly from one end to the other end. So again, that camera just doesn't want to fit right. It will fit exactly in that space. Now, one thing that you see is that this is actually a little bit narrower than what you're actually getting here, but that's okay because you're going to do your jack studs last. All right. So you have those. You have your templates. You have an extra for each one of these. Now you're actually going to use these to build your walls and your trusses to exactly what the size is on the paper, because this is already at 2 scale. So make sure that you don't do anything else with those. You also have either access to a bunch of pieces of longer pieces, or I've given you, in this case, we have a set like this. And these are going to be used for your top plates, your bottom plates, your sills, anything that's not a stud or a jack stud, you will be getting out of this set. Now, I have given you about, I don't know, somewhere around 20% extra of all of this stuff. So if you mess it up, it's kind of up to you to make sure that that you are planning ahead. So let's look at some tools. You should have a little saw that's like this. Some of them are silver, and that's for cutting your pieces to length. A serrated steak knife like this actually works really well too, and it might even be easier to use. It's got to be serrated because you've got to be able to saw through the wood and not just push it. If you push through, it'll crimp the end kind of and make it not easy to use. So you've got that stuff. And lastly, you have, well, not lastly, I got one more thing. You've got a pencil. That pencil is going to be your hammer, and I will explain why in a little bit. The last thing you have is you either have a round container with a round colorful top, or you have a little kind of rectangular guy with your nails in there. Now this happens to have, at the time I make this, I also put 3 little LEDs in there that we're going to use for an electrical project. Please gently and carefully set those aside somewhere. We will be using those later, but we'll be using those nails now, and you have, again, more than you need. So we'll talk about how to do those in a moment. All right, you also have folded in half some 11 by 17 paper, and you're going to need these to design the side walls. So make sure that you keep those somewhere handy because an 8.5 by 11 sheet of standard paper isn't big enough. So that's why you have those. All right. So it says, although you have some extra, please be sparing and plan how to use the materials efficiently. Use only what you need and in a specific way that I'll talk about in a minute. It says, remember the $100 bill speech? So you don't run out. Now, you may not have heard this $100 bill speech, so I'm going to give you the $100 bill speech. So let's say that $100 bills came in various sizes and shapes, okay? And somebody puts a stack of those in front of you and says, okay, you can keep as many as you can fit on this board right here. And as long as none of them overlap or hang over the edge. If it hangs over the edge, you don't get it. And if it overlaps with another one, you don't get either one of them. Okay. You would figure out the most efficient way to lay those $100 bills out. I guarantee you would, because you would try and keep as many of them as you possibly could. So the same thing happens with lumber. If you need a piece of lumber that is, say, this long, don't cut it out of a piece that long. Find a piece that you can take from that is providing the least amount of waste. Because if you cut through all of these for smaller pieces, one at a time, and you leave just kind of a random bunch of stuff, you're going to run out of materials. So you need to think, I'm going to need my longer pieces later. I need to keep my longer pieces as long as possible until I need them. So that's really, really important. All right, let's talk step 2 here. You're going to build the back wall, and we're going to use several studs and a couple of longer boards. And the nail schedule, that means how many nails you have to use per something, is you're going to use 2 nails through the plates into the studs on the ends. All right, so here's our template. It's all ready to scale. We're going to use this to cut our pieces. So we need to get a couple pieces out of our stack of longer lumber, and what I would do now, that's not long, and these aren't long enough to be able to get both of these out of one, so we're going to have to cut 2 of them, and we're going to cut them at and use the template. The template is going to tell us, so I line it up with one side, and I actually have 2 of them. I'm going to cut 2 of them at the same time. Now, this looks like it's sticking out too far over here, but that's just because the camera angle is making it look that way. I have it lined up, and over here I have it lined up, and I'm going to make myself, I'll use the saw because that's what you guys have, and I'm going to make sure that I'm exactly lined up with the end, make myself a little mark. Now, so I don't cut into things, what I would do if I were you is use this this big old thing that you've got for your electrical that we're going to be doing later on, or any board that's going to serve as a cutting board. Now make sure, see where my mark was, that I'm square. Okay, so I'm using this to make sure that I'm cutting at 90 degrees. Okay, if you get off like this or off like that, it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be a little weird and a little off. So just little saws. Let's see how my steak knife does. Oh, yeah, that works out pretty good. So if you got a steak knife, it might actually be a little easier to use the steak knife, but you do have to kind of drag it and cut it, or you will not end up with a nice clean edge, and you'll squish the edges if you push into them. Okay, so again, try and make sure you cut all the way through. We want a nice square clean edge like that. So it's similar to the other side. Okay, not crooked, not squished, not anything like that. All right, so now we have our two pieces. Now, these little leftover pieces, don't throw them away, because you might be able to use them for the trusses or for a windowsill or something like that. All right, so now that we've got those two pieces, set this aside, we need to mark where the studs are going to go, and we're going to do this just like we do this almost in actual building. In actual building, we would lay this out, measure, and mark on each one of them where each one of these studs are. Now, it's a little easier for this project to flip them up and make your marks. Now, you don't have to do it on the ends because the pieces will line up with the end. But you need a pencil, which I seem to have misplaced my pencil. And we're going to mark everywhere there is a stud, and make sure that I'm, again, looking straight down, because it's a little easy to get off. We're going to mark across at each point. Now, it may look like I'm off, but that's because of the camera angle. I'm making sure that I'm exactly straight, and I'm making my lines across both of those guys. Now, again, if we were actually building, we'd be doing this on the face and not on the edge, but it's a little bit easier for us to see that on this. Dark enough so you can see them, but not dark enough to be distracting. Cool, so we've got our little pieces there, and we know where the studs are. Now, there's a couple different ways you can do this in dealing with the nails. The nails are kind of tricky to deal with because they're so small and they're kind of hard to get a hold of. But I'm going to get a few of those. And what I like to do is I like to get like a pair of needle nose pliers, or you actually have a set of wire strippers. And on the end, there's a little place where you can hold these. You might have some that are blue or red or whatever, but they all have a little spot on the end where you can grab that nail. Well, it's a little hard to do that. So again, this is kind of tricky. All right, got my old band glasses on. So now what works pretty well is to hold. Well, these yellow ones don't work as well. If you've got a pair of little needle nose pliers, it might help you a little bit better. And what we're going to do is everywhere where there's one of those marks, we're going to put a nail and start it. And this is going to be, whoops, that one fell out. See, this is where it's okay because you're learning to be precise and hold on to things. Boy, if you don't have one of these yellow ones, you probably got ones that are a little easier to deal with. The red pair or the blue ones. It just helps you hold the nail there. Okay, a pair of tweezers might work too. And you're going to have a nail on the top and the bottom. So you're going to have one there, and you're going to have one that is on the other side. If you can do it easier by hand, then do it by hand. Okay. And we're going to end up with 2 nails at each spot, and you've got to be lined up and make sure that you're there. See, even that little nail is a little bit off to the side. Now, that's okay as long as I make sure that I angle it a little bit inward when I drive it, and angle it that way just a little bit. It's a little hard to see here, but so other than that, you got to make sure that you're lined up. So we're going to again put 2 nails per each spot where a stud is going to go. All right, so I wanted to show you some mistakes that I made before I continue on and zoom in, not out. So this one, if you take a look at my pattern, was obviously one of them. That one was not following the same pattern, and when I looked at it, I went, oh, I don't know how I ended up outside of my marks. So I'm going to have to adjust that. Now I grabbed a pair of needle nose instead of, you might find that's easier. Oops, I didn't mean to go all the way through like that. So you might have to make some adjustments. And again, this is one of those things where it can be frustrating, but there's nothing wrong with something being a little tedious and frustrating. Make sure, and like this one's a little bit, this one is a little bit over to the edge. So I think I might readjust that and move it over a little bit. Now, right now, it's kind of up to you as to whether you want to do the other side or not, or wait till after you've got the studs in. Personally, for me, I think it's easier to set all the nails first, so I will set those on each side. It just makes it a little harder to get to both of them at the same time, but then you're not fighting twisting of the studs. All right, so I got my top plate or bottom plate ready to nail. Make some adjustments. Like one of these, this little guy right here was kind of off to the edge, so I might have to adjust that. And some of your nails are going to fall out, and it's going to be a little tedious, but you'll figure it out. That's part of the learning process, right? All right, so now I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 studs to build this wall. So I'm going to grab my 10 studs and start getting ready to lay this out. Now, here's how I like to do it. I'll start in the middle, just give myself something that just sort of holds things together. Line up your stud. Now, here's where the hammer comes in. You're going to hold both of these together, and then use your pencil. This is your hammer, right? So the eraser works really, really well for you to take that, whoops, and I already have a problem at the very beginning with it coming through. That's called a shiner when that happens, because it sticks out. So I should have adjusted for that a little bit. And look, I bent 2 nails over there. So you're going to have the same frustrations that I have. So this time when I drive this, I'm going to try and go down at a little bit of an angle like that, so that it doesn't come through. So make that a little bit of a habit. See how I'm pulling upward on it? It's a little hard to see with the camera, but I'm actually going downward a little bit so that I don't. Good. Cool. Now, I think for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that other one on the other side. I'm going to flip it over. So, and at this point, maybe I regret doing both nails on both sides. I probably should have just done one and then flipped it over and then put the other one in. In the actual world, now see how this one is off to the edge. I'm going to angle that a little bit so that I'm making sure that I'm going in there. Again, hold them both with my finger at the same time. And I'm going to angle in a little bit. Whoops, those guys are having a hard time staying flat. So we're having similar problems to what we're going to have out in the yard. things are splitting, so we might have to move the nail a little bit. And every once in a while, you'll get one where it's a little hard to push. Try and keep your, now in the yard, just the same thing will happen where you don't want your finger somewhere where if that little pin pokes through, you poke it into your finger. We stand on boards in the yard, and we don't want to stand where you might end up having your foot be in the way if a nail actually comes through. Right, now that I put 3 in there, so you'll see that they're all kind of coming off at different angles. That's okay. We're going to fix that later. So now that I'm working on it, I think that I would suggest that you only do 1 nail in one side first, rather than 2. And see, that's really easy to do where I'm in my own way, but I, again, gave it a shiner, so that's okay. We'll have to start that one over again. Cool. And if one goes the wrong way, try it again. Now, just like in the real world, if you have a nail that's going through and it goes through the side, and you put that nail back through the same hole, it's going to go in the same place. So you have to move it a little bit in order to make sure that you're making a fresh pathway for the nail, because otherwise it will follow the pathway that already is there. All right, so I think I'm gonna do one more for the video, and then I'll pause it. And cool. And build the rest of it. At least put all the studs in. All right, so blurry in there. I've got my nails through 1 nail through each side of these, because I discovered while working on it that I'd rather use 2 than 1. Now I'm going to flip this guy around and do the other side gently. Some of the pieces are going to try to move a little bit, so there we go, gently. Now this is where the marks come in handy. Now this wall happens to be symmetrical, so that it'll line up either way, but you do have to be careful which way you're putting those guys. And now we're going to, you might find that, I'm starting to find as I work on this that that I can use my fingers just as easily as using a pair of needle nose or whatever. So again, you can decide, do you want to preset your nails first, or do you want to just do it as you go along? And it's totally up to you. I tend to like to set them up first, so I can quickly go along and just drive them. All right, and I finally have a wall, 1 nail on each side. I cracked it a little bit over here, but that's no big deal. You might have some issues like that too. If you have one minor little spot that's maybe cracked, that's why you have some glue, or you can ask me about that during class about how to repair things. So now I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to go through. And again, I've kind of discovered that I like, I think I like just starting it just with my fingers instead of a tool. Although sometimes they're a little hard to get in there. It's amazing how sometimes balsa wood can be pretty dense. And I've also discovered that I like using the blunt end of the pencil instead of the eraser end of the pencil, or the just unsharpened end, to drive nails instead of the sharpened end. So another little trick is you can hold that with your fingers. Some of you might find this easier to do, so that you're going to push on it at the same time. It's a little tricky. So, all right. So last step I just want to find a starting spot so that I can keep going. There we go. So my last step is to go through all of these and to put 2 nails on each spot. Now, if you're somewhere sort towards the center, like let's find one that's sort of in the middle, like that one, I'll just have to be a little closer to the edge. And again, you might try this. You could do this upright if you wanted to, although be careful because this wall will want to do this kind of tilty business. See that? So, because just like in the real world, walls aren't strong that way until you put a panel on them. But just put it kind of a little closer to the edge and angled, and you should be okay. All right. So again, last step, get all the nails so that you have 2 in each spot and you're done with the back wall. Congratulations. All right. See you next time.